Welcome on in, everyone, to this week's edition of OA News Overtime. I'm Sara Palczewski, and as always, I'm here with Justin, Lee, and Jordan Hill. So, guys, say hello. What have you guys been up to?
So far, it's been football and puppy watch, as you guys saw from the last episode. We got a little puppy running around. So, honestly, knock on wood, it's been fairly smooth. She's done a good job, and hopefully we can keep that going. So it's been balancing that and balancing spring practice and balancing whatever else comes our way.
Balancing walking the dog what is she up to, 20 minutes, 30 minutes?
It's a slow build. It's just like the install of a new offense. You're just taking it day by day, trying to just get that much better. That's all I can say.
Well, Jordan, I know your struggles with the puppy. I mean, our dog, although she is just a little more than a year old, we just had to take her on like a 2.5 mile walk and spend 30 minutes at the dog park with her, and she still isn't tired. So I get your frustrations with the dog, but I want to touch on and bring y'all into obviously the biggest thing going on in Auburn right now is spring football. The Tigers had their first open spring practice to the public in Jordan Hill Stadium this past Saturday. Y'all were finally able to talk to both the offensive and defensive coordinator, and y'all were also able to talk to players today. So what did you guys kind of take away from Saturday and everything that's been going on this week?
You know, it was a nice kind of change of pace, and not even just for Auburn, but just for college football in general. You just don't see a whole lot of open practices anymore. So, you know, Brian Harsin talked a little bit after Saturday's practice saying, you know, because of COVID and things like that, you know, the Auburn staff hasn't been able to get into the community very much. You know, it's sort of still been limited as we kind of watch for those numbers to continue going down. But he wanted to kind of open up an opportunity for the community to come out and see this team and sort of meet these new coaches. So that's sort of what Saturday was. I thought it was, you know, considering it was just a spring practice, I thought it was a decent little crowd. You know, I mean, I think they said it was about 3,000 people came out to watch the team. You know, not a ton of surprises just from what we saw. You know, things like the offensive line looked very much like it did last year, but, you know, got some new looks with the defense that Derek Mason's going to be running. You got those edge players, a new kind of position that they're installing with this defense. And there was a lot to like. I mean, I know Justin got some good photos of J.J. Pegues just laying out Jacoby McClain. There was a few plays like that where you saw guys show out that made you go, oh man, like this, it was a nice amount of, you know, a taste of what we can get this fall. And, you know, I thought it was a really nice opportunity for all of us to kind of see, you know, the early work and, you know, that I think that was only their third practice so far this spring. So they're still just getting started, but I thought it was a nice sort of, you know, invitation, a nice sort of peek behind the curtain with what Brian Harsin and this team has been working on, even going back to the winter workouts.
I tried my best. I broke Sarah's monopod, so that's broken, and I had to buy a new one. So a new one's on the way. But yeah, I wish you guys could have seen me cackling when I learned that Gus did the exact same thing that day, because everyone's like in Orlando, because everyone's like, oh, it's a new day. He's opening up practice, and then Gus does the same thing at UCF. It makes a lot of sense just because, you know, hospital numbers are getting better with COVID, you know, going outside, you know, it just makes a little bit more sense right now to open up the stadium a little bit. And for those, you know, for all new staff, you know, you're doing basic install. You're not giving anything away. It's your third practice. So yeah, that's why they did it. It makes a lot of sense. And like he said, you know, to get out and show face a little bit because he hasn't been able to do that. So it made a lot of sense, and I think it happened with Auburn, UCF, and maybe a few other places. It's just a good idea to, especially when you're a new staff and you're just starting. It's all really basic practice, so you might as well open it up and let people come see.
I will add on that, Justin, though, it was kind of nice to sort of get a peek of the offense. You know, we've talked to Mike Bobo now, and, you know, it's going to look different than what we saw with Gus Malzahn and, you know, seeing guys under center and, you know, 2 tight end sets. I mean, like, it was like, what, you know? I mean, you might see what I really want to see is like a guy like J.J. Pegues playing fullback and like laying a block for Tank Bigsby like that. I mean, I think it's possible. And, you know, he's talked about wanting to use fullbacks, and he said, you know, sometimes you just got to line it up and run power, man, just go right at them. So yeah, there wasn't a ton to kind of take away from what we saw, but I think there was plenty to kind of be excited and kind of, you know, lay the groundwork for what we may see a little bit more of once A-Day gets here.
And I think it was an added bonus that the weather was also beautiful on Saturday. So that certainly probably encouraged more fans to get out there, and a great way to spend their Saturday and kind of get a glimpse of what everybody might see on A-Day and then again in the fall. And yes, Justin.
And Jordan, there's the other part of it, which they can't say, is that it was about recruiting, man. It let the recruits come in and they got their chance because, so if anyone didn't see Jordan's story, like they've been in a dead period this whole time. Like, what did Powell say? He was like, I haven't been able to do anything Auburn University this entire time. Like,
nothing Auburn University related. Correct.
Right. Cause it's a dead period because of COVID. They didn't want kids traveling. They didn't want anybody getting sick, any bubbles getting burst. So the NCAA has had a dead period for a year now. And so you can't make official visits. You can't see people in person. You can't do anything like that. But when you open up the stadium for anyone to come, anyone includes potential recruiting targets. And if they want to, they can come and they can at least look from a distance and get a feel for practice. And that's what it did. It gave a lot of, and Jordan talked to a few, go to ONow.com and read it. Talked to a few local targets who came and went, and just, for the first time, you can't really visit. So it's an early opportunity to just kind of get a feel for practice, see them operating, see how the coaches and players interact, and just get a little feel for it. So that was another big significant part of why they did what they did and what they gained from doing that.
And I think it was smart, Justin, to the point you were making. I mean, I talked to Caden Story, who's a guy from Lynette. He's a 4-star defensive lineman. I mean, if he winds up going to Auburn, I mean, that's a big get. And, he talked about, like, he was pretty giddy about what he saw from Nick Eason. He's like, man, he was running up there, getting in the drill, like, I think that made a really good impression. And that may wind up being something that, can sway a guy like Caden at the end of the day. And the thing I like, too, you mentioned Powell Gordon. He's a guy that's committed. He's an Auburn high linebacker that's committed to Auburn. But I was talking to him and he was like, yeah, I was sitting with Eston Harris, and that's a 3-star offensive tackle from just down the road in Beauregard. It's like, we were kind of talking about, basically what it would be like if we both went to Auburn. So, I mean, that to me almost was as big, was you had one of those guys that are like, hey, come on board. We want you to play for Auburn. Like, I think that was the decision to open that up. I mean, I think you didn't give up a lot by letting people come watch you install, and there's not a lot you're sacrificing, but I think the payoff is pretty considerable. We may see that in the next few weeks and months if some of those guys who were there might wind up committing to the team. And
you kind of mentioned the payoff, Jordan. How important is it, I guess, to have these types of events when you can't recruit? How big could that be for Auburn in the era of COVID moving forward, when it could be Brian Harson's first recruiting class for a full year? How big is that for him to start doing this now?
I think it's huge, and sort of to the point I was just making, that you're not really giving up a lot by doing it. And, when you're a new head coach, you're kind of trying to, catch up. I mean, I'm sure that there's not very many people that Brian Harson and the staff are recruiting that really got to know him from Boise State. I would have to think the overlap as far as people they we're targeting and recruiting is not very high. So by doing this, they still can't have conversations with those coaches. It's not like, by going to that practice, they could go, walk down and talk to them. That's still off limits, but you got a good look at what they do during drills, how practice is organized, what kind of coaches they are. I had a few people talk about how hands-on guys like Jeff Schmedding and some of those guys appeared to be. So, you're trying to gain any kind of ground you can, and you don't have the benefit of being able to talk to these guys face to face. So I think this is huge. I think, it's important for any of these coaches to be able to have as much, whether it's contact, text and email or mail, carrier pigeon, whatever they're using. But also then just exposure, Saturday's practice was nothing more than exposure for Auburn football and this new staff. And that opportunity was a smart one. Whoever came up with that, it might've been Brad Larondo, who's the chief of staff. I know Coach Harson talked about that, that Brad and some of those guys have had conversations. I thought it was a great idea. And I think that they're going to see there's going to be some real benefits from having done that going down the line.
Well, and again, all this spring practice is leading up to A-Day on April 17th. And Jordan and Justin, you guys both got to finally talk to Mike Bobo and Derek Mason, and then got to talk to some players today. So what have y'all kind of been taking away this week following that open practice?
I really enjoyed the chance to talk to Derek Mason. He's a guy that I've heard, over the years when he was at Vanderbilt at things like SEC Media Days. And, I think that he's got the right approach. The defense is going to look a little different than what we were used to with Kevin Steele. But basically, he said on Monday, look, at the end of the day, it's my job to put people in position to win. We want to get guys. We know there's talent here. We know that guys have different skill sets. We want to make it, take advantage of those different skill sets and get these guys in one-on-one matchups, get them in position to win. And I'm serious. Every defensive guy we've talked to so far, Owen Papos, Kobe McLean, we talked to Derek Hall on Wednesday. I mean, they've been pretty high on what Derek Mason has been doing and the job he's done so far. I think they've done a really good job of selling to these guys that, you guys are going to have to do a little bit of work and learn the scheme and learn your assignments, but that it can pay off in a big way. And, you look at a guy like Derek Hall who's going to be playing edge. I mean, this guy put on like 13 pounds in the offseason. And I have to think that most of that's probably muscle. He wasn't, doing like us, adding weight during COVID. I mean, he was at good weight. And so I think that that's going to be huge. I mean, I think that the fact that they really and truly seem like they bought into what Derek Mason wants to do. And, you can look at his record at Vanderbilt. And, it was kind of rough there at the end, but everybody has always talked up Derek Mason as a defensive mind and the things he can do. So I think that's huge. And I think it's huge that he's coming in. He's got several guys that have proven themselves as starters. Last year's defense had its faults and it wasn't quite as good of a defense, but they were replacing a lot of production from the year before. So I think that, everybody's singing the right tune and saying the right things about the defense so far. And I think that people should be excited about what the defense can do with Derek Mason.
Jordan, let me ask you, was there anything talking with Bobo that maybe surprised you or anything that, because, he was at Georgia for a long time. He's been around the SEC for a long time. Is there anything that you learned about him or anything different that maybe that he might be doing differently here? Or I don't know, what do you kind of take away from being familiar with him for a very long time, but then, where he's at in a new seat?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is I didn't realize that he really did have some ties to Auburn. He talked about that on Monday. He grew up in Thomasville, Georgia for the most part, and that's South Georgia. And it's a lot closer from Thomasville to Auburn than it is Thomasville to Athens. And he got coming to Pat Dye camps, and his dad, George Bobo, is a guy that coached high school football in Georgia for decades upon decades. And, Pat Dye would take those coaches out and they go on bird hunts and stuff like that, kind of build that community with the coaches. I mean, Pat Dye was no dummy with that sort of thing. But so, Mike had some ties to Auburn. Obviously, he went on and played quarterback at Georgia and then coached at Georgia for almost 15 years. But then you have that, and then you have the relationship he built with Brian Harsin. It was a situation where they kind of got to know each other when Mike was the offensive coordinator at Georgia and Harsin was at Texas. And then they kind of got to know each other better when they were both head coaches in the Mountain West. And, he talked about, I didn't expect a phone call, this winter, and it seemed like he was going to be staying at South Carolina. And then lo and behold, Harsin calls and offers him the job, and he takes it. And I think it was a smart move as far as Bobo is concerned. I think there's a lot of potential, and, there's going to be probably some growing pains, hopefully felt more this spring as far as the offense goes, because, it's going to be a different look. But, he had a lot of positives to say. I thought he had, said the right things about Bo Nix and talked about, that his athleticism can be a real benefit. And what I was really interested to hear was he said that felt like Bo had handled the under center snaps probably better than any of the other Auburn quarterbacks. And it's pretty significant because I'd say 99% of Bo's snaps, even going back to high school, they were in shotgun. So that's a considerable adjustment he's had to make. But yeah, I think that, it's going to be interesting to see what this offense looks like. I'll be really interested to see what they do at A-Day and what we kind of get to see out of that.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how this Auburn team, both offensively and defensively, progresses as we head into the fall season. But to kind of wrap up football, I want to bring y'all back to our favorite winter sport, Auburn basketball. Right after we finished recording last week, Jamal Johnson announced he was entering his name into the transfer portal. And within the last day or so today, I think I saw he announced he's going to UAB. But the bigger point is, did y'all think that Jamal Johnson was going to be one of the players leaving Auburn this offseason?
Justin, you want to go first or me?
Sure. Well, it's just tricky because I think when you do look over, it depends on what you want to do. But if you do look over, he wasn't going to start next year, probably not. And depending on the turnover, who they bring in, I mean, even if, we're still thinking in the future, but even if Sharif leaves, they're going to bring in a replacement for him. Jamal, we were surprised because obviously he had talked about the future. I don't think Jamal's in a lose situation. I think Jamal could have stayed at Auburn and been happy. I think he could leave and be happy. I don't think he was miserable at Auburn. I don't think he's left angry at all. It could be, obviously we don't know anything, but it could just be, hey, Andy Kennedy's got a spot up there, that might be pretty fun. Go do that. If Bruce is telling him, hey, you're probably only going to play 5 or 6 minutes, a game next year, go play for Andy, man. That'd be fun. So, we don't know what goes on in these conversations. All we know is that at the last game, Jamal was pretty happy with being at Auburn and happy and seemed to look forward to the future. And we know that he has put out a statement since just thanking Auburn and being very amicable. So yeah, in that way, it could be a surprise because obviously he was happy, but it's not a surprise now that we know he's going to UAB. That's a pretty sweet spot. He's going home, and he can probably get a lot more playing time there. So for that, no, it makes a lot more sense now, honestly, when you think about it. Wouldn't you say?
I agree. I think you hit the nail on the head. When you look at what Auburn basketball is going to want to do this offseason, we've already seen, and we'll probably talk about this as well, some of the transfers that they've sort of targeted and guys they might be bringing in. But the role, I think you can't argue that the role he's going to play at UAB is going to be a bigger one than he was going to play at Auburn. He's probably going to be coming off the bench at Auburn. And I think it just makes a lot of sense. It's also kind of a chance for him to go home. He's from Birmingham. I think that UAB team is going to be really fun because you got him and KJ Buffin, who was at Ole Miss, and you got Andy Kennedy. I think it's a setup that makes a whole lot of sense. So I think you can't really blame Jamal for making this move. I think it was probably the better one as far as, his long-term future. He's going to be playing a bigger role at UAB. And, it's a considerable loss given the fact that, that's again, more depth that Auburn's going to have to find a way to fill. But that's the beauty of the transfer portal. That's what's going to be happening over the next few weeks and probably months. And, it might be just sort of the first of the change that we see coming. We already know Justin Powell's in the portal. We still don't know where he's going yet. That could be something we find out this week. It could be something that gets kind of extended on out. But, I think it made a lot of sense for Jamal. I don't think it would have been a mistake to come back to Auburn. But by going to UAB, playing for a proven guy like, Andy Kennedy, I think that's huge. And I think that he'll find that was probably a good decision when it's all said and done.
So in the backcourt, you've got Powell and Jamal out. Up Jasper, the guy from College of Charleston, committed, and then you've got an offer to this guy from Missouri, Xavier Pinson, who Bruce. I just remember Bruce speaking really glowingly of him when they played. Bruce thinks highly of him. So that's kind of the situation right now. You got 2 out, and you've got 1 committed now, and we'll see if they get a commit out of Xavier, who could fill the shoes, who's proven it at the SEC level, and would bring veteran college basketball experience, and that's something that this team does not have. This past year, we talked about how young they were, you can be a great young player and not succeed in college basketball because even if you're bound for the NBA. Sometimes college basketball experience counts. We saw it with Ole Miss when Ole Miss beat them with those dudes. Well, I can't remember their names, but they got that guard who's been there for 5 years, and then they had that transfer from Arizona. Sometimes you need people with college basketball experience, and they would have that in these 2 guys, in Xavier Pinson, and they will have it with Zep Jasper. So those moves make a lot of sense for me, and then obviously so. That's 2 out, 2 in, and then obviously I personally, if I'm Bruce Pearl, I'm waiting until the very end to see if Sharif or not. I'm not finding his replacement until I know he's gone. So we'll see though. we'll see. But that it feels like that's kind of where the roster is right now.
And it's important to keep in mind that we know JT Thor is going to test the NBA waters. Obviously, he's still got a chance to come back. Nothing's set in stone, but that's sort of the first domino to fall. And I would expect, obviously, Sharif's going to test his NBA stock, and probably Alan Flanagan as well. So, it's not a definite with any of those guys that they're for sure gone, market, he's gone, signed, sealed, and delivered. But they're going to test it, and that opens up the opportunity, the situation where there's more movement and there's more spots to fill, and maybe an even different looking roster than we are currently anticipating with the basketball team.
I'll say I don't think either of these guys are Sharif replacements. You know what I mean? I think they are Powell and Jamal replacements. I don't think he's gone down that was anything as far as that goes.
It's definitely fun to kind of watch Bruce Pearl build his team from the transfer portal. And it'll be interesting also to see where Walker Kessler goes from UNC, since he was a former Auburn target. It'll be interesting to see if Bruce tries to target him as well. And you never know who else might be from Auburn that we don't know. It might be leaving for the NBA for sure, or they might end up also entering in the transfer portal. So it'll be interesting to see what other moves Bruce Pearl makes during the offseason, especially with not knowing what Sharif Cooper is going to do as well. So I want to bring y'all back to spring sports. It is SEC season for both softball and baseball, and softball is resuming their SEC play after taking a kind of a break weekend. They did play top 15 team in Florida State and split the series with them, but this weekend they have, they're going on the road to Missouri. So what do you guys kind of have taken away? They got swept by Alabama to start the season, kind of split the games this past weekend, and now have to start SEC play again.
Right. We talked to Mickey Dean this week, and it's kind of, I don't know, you say they split last week, but at one point in time, it didn't look good because they had lost 3 straight to Alabama last weekend, swept, and then they lost both their games on Saturday. So they were on a 5-game losing streak going into Sunday. So I just kind of asked him, maybe what do you learn about your team there? And then we talked to Mickey, and then KK Dismukes, pitcher. And she said that, before those Sunday games, about 20 minutes before the first game, they had a conversation, and a lot of it was just being together for each other, keeping your head up even though you strike out, because there's a bigger picture in mind, there's a bigger game in mind. So maybe that's a learning experience that they could go through and bring into this next Missouri game, because that Sunday, so then you enter on a 5-game losing streak, and they won 2 one-run games, and one of them, of course, was to a top 25 team in Florida State. So kind of gutted out 2 wins. You never want to lose to Kennesaw State, but the positive is that they came back and gutted out those wins. And now it's the SEC schedule is the meat of it now. I think they could still add some non-con, but we'll see. But that's where you are, and they're going to go to Missouri, and obviously that's going to be a big challenge. So, you look at, when you get swept by Alabama, that you never want to get swept by your rival, but they're the class of the SEC right now. And so when you play someone else, maybe you can get a little bit better understanding of where you stand in the conference. That's kind of the hard part about opening with the very best. That's obviously always a challenge. So now they can maybe get some confidence going. We'll see how they compete against Missouri, and maybe just let themselves get a better understanding of where they stand against, a more middle of the road team, and not just the best of the very best.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Justin. I mean, I think all 3 of us kind of understood going into that Alabama series, even taking 1 game was going to be a tall task. So it'll be really interesting to see how that Missouri series goes. Is that, a situation where they have been able to kind of shake off what could have been a tough start to conference play, and should be interesting and should tell us a lot about what this team's able to do.
You mentioned a tough start to conference play. Auburn baseball definitely had a tough start to conference play at number 4. I think they were ranked number 4, Ole Miss, this past weekend, getting swept out there.
Same thing as softball, opening with the best team. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was not the weekend I'm sure Auburn baseball was hoping for. So what did y'all kind of take away from that series, especially just because they definitely lost 1 game in a really weird fashion that was super high scoring. in the end.
Yeah, we knew, kind of like Alabama and Auburn softball, that Auburn and Ole Miss baseball, that was going to be a tall task for Auburn baseball. And, I know that they lost a series, but 2 of the games they lose by 1 run. And then that last game was just, nothing short of bonkers. They got down something like, I think they were down 14-0, because I think I made a joke about them being down 2 touchdowns because of John Rice Plumlee, the quarterback for Ole Miss, who's playing baseball. But then they fought back and at least made it kind of interesting in the end. So we knew that was going to be a tough test. I think the fact that you got Jack Owen out there finally pitching again, that was a huge positive. I think that, even if you can't win those games, the fact that you kept it close is at least a positive sign, but you got to see some improvement going forward. And that kind of leads to this week. They were supposed to play South Alabama this week. Game was canceled because of the weather. Now you turn your attention to Kentucky, your first home SEC series of the year. So that's going to be huge. I think we should be able to look at this Kentucky series and see what Auburn's, how they're set up, what they're able to do. And, that's a series they should be able to come out with. So I think it'll be a very telling series, and it'll be interesting to see what the pitching staff's able to do and if they're able to get a few wins against the Wildcats.
I don't know anything about Kentucky. Last night they played Butler, and it was a long game, and they came back in the bottom of the 9th, and I was waiting to update the standings for the paper, and I was waiting on this stupid Kentucky game, and it just chapped my hide. So that's all I know about Kentucky baseball. But, but we'll see how they do. The one positive from last week is, one of the positives from last week is Cody Greenhill. In that first game as a day one, he threw with Ole Miss's ace, and I think he threw 8 innings, at least 7 or 8 innings. And he pitched a beauty, and that was a 1-0 game. It was scoreless, and then the Ole Miss got its run off of the reliever that came in after Cody. Cody's the converted closer. This is all new for him this year, being a starter, and he had a gutsy, great effort on that first game. So that was a huge positive to take away. He's not just a one-trick pony. That he's got more in his bags than just being a closer, fastball closer. So that was a big positive. The ace. They're going to be confident handing the ball to him, and he's going to be confident throwing. So we'll see if they can. But they were still upset about it. But what you got to do is win, and that's what they're going to try to do against Kentucky.
And this will definitely be a place you want to be. Plainsman Park will be a fun place to be this weekend, especially if the weather's nice, to watch Auburn baseball start their SEC season at home, their first home season, SEC series of the season. Now, since the last time we talked, March Madness has gotten underway. Obviously, no Auburn basketball this year, but that first weekend was just full of madness. And how are y'all's brackets doing? Because mine, I might as well just throw all 3 of mine in the garbage at this point.
Mine doesn't exist anymore. It's gone.
I have no worries.
I had Ohio State as the Final Four team. Who else did I have? I got Gonzaga winning it, so I could still have Gonzaga. But no, I had Texas. Texas as a Final Four team. They lost in the first round, and it is bad, brutal. It's a brutal year, but I mean, what can you expect on a year like this? Nothing matters. Who cares? It's just chaos.
I had one word to describe my bracket, and it was Virginia. They just totally tanked me. But I also want to give a shout out. There was a newspaper that wrote about Illinois and Chicago Loyola, and obviously they got Sister Jean, and the headline they ran was "None and Done." So you gotta appreciate a good pun. That was a nice little consolation for what was.
That's on brand for Jordan.
Totally ruined bracket.
I do love me some Sister Jean. I mean, Illinois, I had in my final in all of my brackets and did not like to see them get knocked out by Loyola Chicago. But the fact Sister Jean is still alive and is at the tournament games, I mean, she's awesome. I love her scouting report and her pregame prayer before the Illinois game to get Loyola to the Sweet 16. But this year has been pretty crazy. And I will say I am going to be cheering for Oral Roberts in that top bracket, and maybe they can pull off an upset and meet Baylor before headed to the Final Four. We'll see. But them upsetting Ohio State was absolutely wild to me.
Just totally ruined. That was basically the domino that just started the downfall for me. As soon as that happened, it was all over but the crying.
Shout out to Abilene Christian University with the win over Texas, baby. Let's go. I've covered some stuff at ACU. That's a place. I don't know how you recruit to Abilene, but they did.
And shout out to the Abilene player who immediately gave the horns down. Just
yes,
it was final.
A whole energy. But think about it though, like everyone's making jokes, but think about like all those kids are probably from Texas and none of them got a Texas offer. So you know what? Do it, dude. It's you earned it.
And since you're talking about that bracket, I just want to bring up a little bit. Auburn fans are already on Twitter, per usual, pretty mad that Alabama is in that bracket and now won't have to face Texas. Had to play a number 10 seed, started off, of course, playing the 15 seed, then a 10 seed. And I forget who they play coming up, but it's not a high seed either. It's whoever beat Abilene Christian to head to the Sweet 16. So it's not like Alabama's playing this roadmap to the Final Four like Auburn did, where they had to play Kansas and then Kansas, UNC, and then Kentucky to get to the Final Four. It seems like their bracket is shaping up to be just a little bit easier than Auburn having to go through all the blue bloods. And naturally, you got Auburn fans all over social media. One calls my boyfriend every day to complain about how easy that track is and how awful it'll be when Alabama goes to the Final Four. And it's like, okay, well, they might have to still beat Michigan, but Michigan almost lost LSU. So
yeah,
definitely
that with Auburn fans.
And that was a good point I forgot about. I think Auburn fans were very happy by that Virginia loss that totally tanked my brackets. I guess I'll take solace in that.
They're fine with that. I think it's an annual reminder that this is a terrible way to find the best team in the country, but it's a lot of fun, so we just do it. That's absolutely. Whoever wins the tournament, it's absolute crapshoot, but we all like it, so we just do it anyway.
March Madness for sure is the best part, but I know Jordan has something else to add, so I'll have him chime in before I ask the favorite weekly end of podcast questions.
Yeah, I was just going to add a shout out to Nell Fortner over there on the women's side at Georgia Tech, former Auburn coach. I think they're headed to the Sweet 16, so pretty successful. And she got a former player on the bench there with her as an assistant, so shout out to them.
Shout out to Blanche Alverson, the Avalanche. That's what we called her back in the day. No, we ran a headline like that one time. Did you guys see Troy? Man, Troy got screwed.
That was just.
And they were seated. They were seated way too low but Justin kind of explained it to me this way. It made a lot of sense just because women's college basketball is so top heavy. I can understand why they seed, a Sun Belt team low like that because. I mean, you look at that tournament, and it's the same way as UConn and Baylor just torching people. But, yeah, man, that's tough. Tough for Troy. Tough scenes.
Well, guys, as March Madness continues for both the men's and women's basketball programs in the country, what do you guys have coming this week in the paper and online?
For Auburn football, we had a chance to talk to some of the guys today. So I'll have a story in Thursday's paper about Derek Mason and kind of highlighting all the defensive players who have been singing his praises and sort of what he's bringing to the table. And besides that, I'm sure we're going to talk to a few more guys later on in the week and have more stories as we build up. We're going to have another practice viewing on Thursday, so we'll get another kind of glimpse behind the curtain and probably learn a lot from it and give us a more of a sense of what we can expect once we get to A-Day on April 17th.
Football, and and SEC baseball and softball this weekend. And then one more week, April 2nd, gymnastics will be in the NCAA regionals. So a busy time as expected.
Well, as always, everybody can find both Jordan and Justin's work online at oinow.com, and following them on Twitter is always probably one of your best ideas. We all banter back and forth, but they also put out some pretty good content that's worth the follow for them.
The banter's good content too.
We're here for all of it. Come on, don't sell us short.
And there's puppy content too. I won't sell. That's the home point. There are dogs on their Twitter accounts, and Justin will post his cat, but it is like we said last week, it is a puppy friendly podcast. But again, everyone, thank you so much for the support as we continue to roll on in this new venture of ours. And we look forward to speaking with you guys again this time next week.